Welcome everyone to the Voices of the River webinar series. Today we have the good fortune of welcoming Drew Richardson from River Action. Drew is a freshwater and marine biology graduate, and he is community coordinator at River Action. Drew has been inspired by being a wild swimmer and is a nature enthusiast, and he takes that forward into his role with the community outreach. And he's going to be speaking today about River Action's new River Rescue Kit and how communities can help support and hopefully recover their river quality. And he's also going to be speaking briefly on the March for Clean Water in London coming up. Welcome, Drew.
Thank you ever so much. Yeah, shall I share my screen and without further ado, kick off?
Please do.
Absolutely.
Hopefully that's appearing as it should do.
Yeah.
I'm seeing nods. Fantastic. Okie dokie. So this presentation is called How to Rescue Your River, which is maybe a bit of a lofty, ambitious title, but let's see where we get to along the way. So yeah, I'm Drew Richardson. I'm a communities coordinator at River Action, and I'll be telling you a bit about kind of who we are at River Action and what we do as we go through. But first of all, I thought it would be useful to talk about the issues actually affecting our rivers. Our rivers are in a bit of a mess, and I love puns and rhyming and various things like that. So we're going to play a little game first called Guess the Mess, where you can guess the mess that our rivers are in. I mean, I don't know what the best way to do this is. Maybe I'm going to break the rules and say come off of mute, or if that just feels like far too much audience participation, then feel free to just drop things in the chat as well. But first of all, we will start with what I think is an easy one. In England, what percentage of our rivers are polluted? Please feel free to make your guesses in the chat or just shout them out. Waiting for stunned, embarrassed silence.
You got some numbers in the chat.
Fantastic. Jennifer's 100 with an exclamation mark, which I particularly like. 90% from Chris. Well, Jennifer, you've won. It is 100% of our rivers are polluted. Now, that particular stat is in relation to sort of chemical pollution. Our ecological kind of status of our rivers is slightly better, with 12% being ecologically okay, which is a pretty low bar for what is better, but there we go. Next, in 2023, how many hours of sewage were discharged into English rivers? Now, I realize hours is a really odd metric for measuring sewage, and yes, it is. It should be volume, but unfortunately, it's not. We've only got hours to work with. That's the only thing measured nationally. So, any guesses on how many hours? It would be helpful if I could tell you how many hours were in a year, but I don't know that. Should have prepared better. So it is 3.6 million hours. Ah, Jennifer, have you
Oh,
seen
Jennifer's
my
on fire.
slides already? Well on it. I love it. So yeah, so unfortunately 3.6 million hours. Now this should only be happening in exceptional circumstances. Pretty much happens whenever it rains because our sewage and our drains for just the roads, for stuff coming off our roofs and our gutters, it all goes into the same place. So it all kind of gets chucked in together. It raining in the UK, I think if you asked anyone from a different country if that seemed exceptional, I think they would say nope. The UK is known for its rain. I think anyone living in the UK would agree with that. So obviously, this is not a good number. So the next one is the percentage of UK wetland habitats that have been lost in the last 100 years with climate-induced drought and over-abstraction or drawing of water affecting most rivers. So what percentage of UK wetland habitats? Got 80% from Chris. Any other guesses? No more guesses. I'm going to jump in.
30.
Oh, 30%. Oh, I'm sorry, Henry. It's far, far worse than that. It is 90%. Jennifer managed. Jennifer, you've nearly got all of them right, so all the pressure is on for the next fact. So yes, unfortunately, it's 90% over the last 100 years. Over the last decade, over the last 10 years, the Environment Agency, which is kind of set up to enforce environmental laws, has had its funding. This is kind of a two-part one, either increased or decreased, and then by how many percent? So put in your guesses for whether it's increased or decreased, and then by how much percent. And remember, this is over the last 10 years. So okay, 50% decrease, down by 60. Okay, I think we've got consensus that it's
Yeah.
decreased. Um, which, yes, you'd think over 10 years it would have steadily increased with inflation and things like that. But sadly, it has decreased by 75%. So I'm
Ooh.
sorry, Jennifer, you nearly had all of them right. You were very close. Um, but yeah, so obviously enforcing our environmental laws must be incredibly difficult when over the last 10 years, your funding has been decreased by 75%, which is very extreme. So that's kind of the state our rivers are in at the moment. It's a very quick overview. Um, River Action's solution to this and kind of our 5-year strategy is to advocate for policy change. So we want to influence the government, um, and we want agriculture, water, other river-based industries to adopt climate and nature-friendly practices and stop poisoning our rivers. And we can do that through engagement with those people, but also through influencing government and ensuring effective regulations are in place to stop river pollution and to ensure there's good enforcing of those regulations. Now, we can only do that policy work, that advocacy, if we can mobilize public opinion. So that's kind of the next part of our strategy. So we can only do that by putting pressure on the government and polluting industries, and the public will only put on that pressure if they're informed. So we need to raise public awareness of river pollution, of habitat loss, natural solutions, and we want to do that by doing high quality and inspiring content and press coverage. Our campaigns team are amazing, and I'm kind of in awe of them. They've worked super hard on informing the public through social media and press relations, to the point where in September last month, 25% of all environmental news coverage mentioned River Action specifically. That's the most any environmental charity has been mentioned in the news in September. And that's versus kind of big sort of household names. So we have the stage, but we don't have anything to say on that stage without evidence and stories from local campaigns. We're entirely reliant on that. So our primary goal, number one in our strategy, is to empower local river activism and restoration, to get local groups collecting data and telling powerful stories so we can put them on that stage to highlight their voices and join all these local voices together to create a national campaign to inform the public, to put that pressure on to drive policy change and behavior change. So I'll give you some examples of of how we do that in practice. So, the Thames Campaign. This is Dave. Um, Dave was swimming along the River Thames in a race, and while he was swimming, he noticed a poo, a human poo, floating alongside him as he was racing. And no matter how fast he went, it was floating next to him, alongside him. I've heard this story from a few different people. I've never found out if Dave won or the poo won. But needless to say, Dave has been continuing to battle that poo since that day. Um, he's from Henley and Marlow River Group, and he came to us to say, what can I do about this? Um, so our main thing that we do is looking at how can we partner people up and build community. So we found Henley Mermaids, who are a local a swimming group. We found Windrush against sewage pollution. We tied him in with the local river trust, and eventually all these different groups came together and created the Oxfordshire Clean Rivers Initiative, including Earthwatch, including Oxford Friends of the Earth, the Even Load Catchment Partnership, Thames 21, Oxford University Students' Union, and lots of concerned local residents. Um, Chloe, another communities team member, who works alongside Henry and I, held a theory of change meeting to bring the community together, and kind of went, right, that's our plan to bring the community together, to do some citizen science, and do that ahead of a big event so we can get some media coverage, and can start doing some advocacy. So Earthwatch got involved and provided phosphate and nitrate kits and training, and then we worked with Dave to get him E. coli testing as well, so he could actually say, look at his sewage, and actually it's detrimental to human health as well. British Rowing had just set up their sustainability plan, and wanted to get involved. So half of British Rowing's clubs are along the Thames, so I'm told. So they were a fantastic partner to get involved with. So, talking of these kind of big rowing events as key media moments, we had the boat race, which is Oxford versus Cambridge in Putney, and uh, do forgive me if I'm kind of being a bit patronizing in explaining these things. I don't know rowing particularly well, and I'm based up north in York, so I don't know much about rowing races. So I might over explain these. But ahead of the boat race, we went to Fulham Reach, who are another rowing club, and they were testing E. coli ahead of the boat race. And then when the boat race happened, all that data was released, to create an internationally spread story. Um, we helped to hold hustings in May ahead of local council elections. Councillors from each party came and talked about the river. Again, there was E. coli testing ahead of the Oxford Eights, which is eight people boat races between the different colleges of Oxford Uni. We managed to get Alexander Armstrong on board for that as well, and involved in testing for the race. And the Oxford Clean Rivers Festival was held to tie in with that race, so people coming for the race could also learn about the river pollution as well. And then we had the general elections coming up, which provided another time to do hustings and to get MP candidates to talk about the rivers as well, and make it an important part of um, kind of their platform, I suppose. And again, Dave was collecting lots of data for the month prior to the Henley Regatta. And we managed to get Steve Redgrave involved and again create those big media stories. And then the impact of that is when things happen, like Ofwat says that Thames Water are going to have to pay a fine. Our team gets a call from Channel 4 and says, can you meet us today? And we go, great, we can get to the Thames, and then we can call up a group like Henley Mermaids and say, fantastic, can you come along and be on Channel 4 as well? And then that's a way that we can get small local groups given a very national platform to discuss their views. So that was the Thames. Um, Kind of how River Action started, I suppose, was the Wye campaign. And this is the River Wye catchment. So it starts up in Plumluman and goes all the way through down to Chepstow. Their issue is chickens, as you can see from this map. Massive industrial levels of chicken. I want to say farming, but it feels more like manufacturing across the catchment. The chickens are fed on Brazilian soy, which is incredibly phosphate rich. Their manure is then spread onto fields, and when it rains, it runs off into the River Wye. Eutrophication happens, which causes algal blooms. So in 2020, they had an algal bloom that covered 140 miles of the river. And that bloom means that light can't get through the algae down to the plants below. Um, the Wye catchment is a special area of conservation to protect the river's famous and once extensive ranunculus river weed beds. 90% of the river's ranunculus, which is incredibly difficult to say, have now been lost, smothered by the algal blooms. And last year, Natural England downgraded the Wye's environmental status to unfavourable declining. Um, so that ranunculus isn't oxygenating the water, which means the fish don't have enough oxygen. They're dying off. The birds and mammals leave. And we're really at a stage now where we've got 2 years to reverse this damage, or we're past the turning point and the river won't be able to recover itself, if that makes sense. So we worked to bring together different groups that were already working on the Wye to try and stop this, and they formed the Save the Wye coalition, where I borrowed this map from. And they're doing incredible work. They've got 200 community members and volunteers taking samples, and they came up with a sampling kit that worked for them. And they all feed into the same database. So they can see what parts of the catchment are worst affected. And then that helps them to work out who the culprits are. So they can then do freedom of information requests to the Environment Agency. So, like, how many water quality samples were taken? How many farms have you inspected? How many of those farms broke rules? How many enforcement actions were then taken against them? So, between 2013 and 2019, the number of water quality samples taken by the EA fell by 45%. And to date, the Environment Agency has not prosecuted any farmers or landowners in the catchment for breaking the rules. The Environment Agency chair said the rules were deliberately not enforced for the first couple of years because the government asked them not to. Um, DEFRA said he said DEFRA asked us to work with farmers through advice and guidance while farmers got used to these regulations. Um, so they've been inspected but ignored the issues. So we took them to court basically. So because of all this data, because of all this information, we could take the Environment Agency to court. The outcome of that court case was that the judge said farming practices must change, and that thanks to River Action and us taking them to court, the Environment Agency actually changed its approach to enforcing the farming rules for water, which is good news. But because they've made that change, the legal challenge failed. However, we believe these changes that they've made probably aren't enough, and we're going to be watching this to see if we can appeal. But the agency we worked with, the legal agency Lead Day, are kind of looking for people in the catchment to put together, I mean, what you'd see on American legal dramas being called a class action, but where they can get lots of different individuals together to say, how has this impacted you? Let's bring all your voices together. Um, but even if a legal action fails, it's still got the Environment Agency to change their rules. It's still got lots of people involved and grew support. So these two campaigns are just two examples of how we're doing this strategy, how it's about empowering communities to mobilize public opinion, to advocate for policy change, change in how the Environment Agency does things, all that sort of thing. We try to do all three parts of this strategy all at once, all the time, but it's safe to say we're in a big stage of mobilizing public opinion, because it's safe to say that kind of frustration at river water quality has never been more talked about in the news, things like that. So we want to do that public pressure work that we talked about to advocate for policy change through the March for Clean Water. So you can scan the QR code here to go to the website to learn more about it. Um, it's a march on the 3rd of November in London. And whilst we at River Action are organising it, we're doing so alongside others like Surfers Against Sewage and lots of other groups in the coalition who are all contributing to its organising. It's very much not a River Action march. It's there to give a voice and allow anyone who is passionate about their waterways to have their message heard. We're just bringing everyone together and sorting out like things with the police and things like that. We're just doing the admin in the background. So the thing you need to know about the March for Clean Water, the plan is for everyone to wear blue, to flood the streets. It's going to be a family-friendly march. We have three interlinked asks of government, I suppose, for the march, which are leading with reform regulation, enforce the law, and end pollution for profit, which is all under the banner of stop poisoning our waters. Or sorry, stop the poisoning of our waters. Obviously, it's not the government poisoning our waters, but they have the ability to stop the poisoning. So it's really to show the government the Water Special Measures Bill that's being read in Parliament at the moment needs to have substance and it needs to have efficacy. So we've been bringing together different groups, which we're calling the coalition. We've got over 100 different organizations within that coalition now. Everything from small local groups like the Henley Mermaids, who we mentioned earlier, Friends of the River Ex, all your sort of local river campaign groups, to massive household organizations like the WWF, the National Trust, the WI, Greenpeace, lots of different groups, and we're trying to get groups that maybe aren't obviously rivers or seas or lakes to get involved as well. And that's something I should say about this march as well. It's not just about rivers; it's about all our waterways that are suffering from pollution. Um, so if you're on this call and you're interested in adding your organization to this coalition, I've got my email address at the end. Please do email me, and I can get you up onto the coalition and talk to you about how you can get involved. We're asking lots of community groups to do pieces to camera to say why uh, why they're getting involved and what their particular message is and why they're marching. Um, and we're also offering support for those groups who wouldn't be represented at the march without some financial support as well. So we've got a community transport fund, which if I'm really clever and I'm unfortunately struggling, there we go. I will try and drop that in the chat now. But if you follow that, that's a form to get some support for putting on coaches and things like that to get there. Um, and yeah, we've managed to get lots of impactful stories out of this to raise the profile, to get the public involved with Chris Packham on 5 News, Joe Lycett. Joe Brand is going to be putting out adverts with Global Radio, who do things like Capital FM, Heart FM, all those radio channels to get people involved. We've got Bear Grylls, all those sorts of things. Um, but obviously, the more voices we have talking about this, the better. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of how our strategy works in practice. And if you're interested in following this strategy for yourself and making it work for your local area, that's literally our primary goal. That's literally our primary goal in our strategy, to empower you to do this. So we've put all our knowledge and how-to guides and things like that into our river rescue kit, which I know was kind of a big part of this, and I've wombled on for ages. So I will talk through this. It's it's not a kit. It's not like a sort of box which you take to your riverside and you pour lots of magic potions into your river and it magically turns clean and you've done it. You've rescued the river. It's a website. It's a toolkit for helping people to set up their own groups to campaign for their rivers. So you'll have all sorts of different things in here to set up a group, to start testing your river, to gather that data you need to make stories. There'll be information to know your legal rights and what data you can request from water companies or from the Environment Agency to help create those stories. You can then use all that data to campaign for your river and start to get media interest as well. And you may want to go on to make legal challenges. Legal challenges can be costly. Testing your river can be costly as well. So we've got some information there to help you raise funds and how to do that through grants, how to do that through crowdfunding, all those various things. Um, we want this kit to be as accessible to groups of any maturity, whether you're an individual who wants to do something in your area, to an established group looking for tips to take your campaign to the next level. So each page is designed to give you a quick bite-sized overview to help newcomers with resources and further information. So those who are further along in their journey can read further on a topic and can really get into the nitty-gritty as well through kind of those additional resources. It'll also give you information on the different issues affecting rivers like sewage pollution, agricultural pollution, water scarcity, and give you useful facts to bolster your campaigns as well. Every page will feature videos with tips and advice from community groups who are already doing the work as well. So I'll give you a quick little example of that.
The main pollution on the River Wye comes from agriculture. So the statistics from the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales are that 72 to 74% of the phosphorus pollution on the River Wye comes from the farming sector. So while sewage is a massive issue on many rivers, and there are points where we have sewage pollution on the Wye as well, the bulk of the pollution here is coming from farming. We've just got a farming system here that's out of balance with its environment. So to take the poultry sector, there's over 20 million chickens in the River Wye catchment area, and they create more manure than the land can absorb, especially on top of all the cattle and sheep that have always been here.
So that's kind of an example of the sorts of things that you'll be able to find within the River Rescue Kit. We'll also have a community map, and this is where individuals who are interested in supporting river protection can find groups local to them that they can join and get involved with. But its primary function is for community groups, and it's for them to be able to link up with other groups and to share ideas. So you'll be able to filter for certain key issues like agriculture pollution or chalk stream abstraction and find other groups facing the same issues as you. Or you can filter by what actions they're taking. So if you want to find someone who's also taking legal action, you can filter for it on the map. You can then go visit their website, see how they've approached it, and maybe contact them if you want to collaborate on a legal action or something like that. Groups will be able to add their campaigns to the map here too. We're still building the kit. We're still kind of doing the final bits. So the map's a bit sparse. So if you want to be added, please do get in contact. Um, I'd say scan this QR code here, and you can sign up so that when the River Rescue kit is ready, we can inform you to let you know that it's there. It's been a real whistle-stop tour of the River Rescue kit. It will be launching in November, and we've done that so that it ties into just after the March for Clean Water. If anyone's feeling inspired, they can go to the River Rescue Kit and see what they want to do next. I realize I've gone through that really fast, so I do apologize. But yeah, any questions at all, anything about joining the march, anything about the River Rescue Kit or anything discussed today, please do feel free to email me, drew@riveractionuk.com. And yeah, I will try and help as best I can.
Thank you, Drew. That was great. If anyone has got a question, pop it in the chat or raise your hand, and I will hope one of us will hopefully see you. I've got a question in the chat, which is Drew. You have mentioned that the Wye has 2 years before tipping point is reached. Can you explain how tipping points are determined for that river system? How can local communities find out what the tipping point is for their catchment?
That is a really, really good question. I must admit, I don't know the kind of background behind this fact. But it's definitely one where I can talk to my team. Chloe, who is part of our team, has done work on the River Wye and can definitely help answer that question. Because you're right, having those sort of those bits of key information is really useful. A lot of the groups we work with try to get some connection to a local university who can give them more information, who are interested in doing studies on their river. And quite a lot of this information can come from those places. So up in the north, we've got the University of York are doing lots of information, are doing lots of studies on river pollution. And then I know we've got Cardiff doing lots of work on river pollution as well in Wales. So universities are absolutely a brilliant kind of person to team up with to try and get this information specific to your river. But yeah, I will get in contact with Chloe, who can hopefully ask more about the River Wye one specifically.
Fab. Chris, lovely to see you. I see you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, this is a bit more organisational, almost philosophical. Bear with me. In Oxford, we've had an awful lot of activity around pollution in the Thames, obviously. And we set up, I'm with Oxford Friends here. We had River Action, your boss down back in November to talk about this. We've set up the Oxfordshire Clean Rivers Initiative. We had an event that went pretty well, maybe not as well as we'd like to have done while the rowing festival was on. But the problem is it's gone a bit quiet since. People know the pollution's there, the councils are on board, the media's on board, but it's almost like who's actually taking this forward? Oxford Friends here, we are deeply concerned. But we've also got climate, transport, housing, blah, blah, blah. There is no kind of river action group, which might be an ideal thing. We have people like Windrush against sewage pollution, but they are really one group outside the city, and they've got very clear modus operandi. We've got swimming groups who come and go. We've got national charities like Earthwatch who've done some brilliant work with River Action on monitoring. What we actually need is to think, okay, what do we actually do about this while the special measures bill is going through?
Mm.
And how do we actually coordinate it? I mean, if I could find someone who wanted to actually take on the job of coordinating, we could put some money into that. But at the moment, we're kind of, I think there's too many people all saying this is a really bad thing, no real clarity. I'm thinking, for instance, we have a thing called the Oxford Green Fair, beginning of December, major event at the town hall, and this might be an issue to focus on there. But if I was going to ask people to do stuff, what would they do? And any thoughts on how we pull together all these rowers, swimmers, people who don't like pollution, a lot of whom don't really have much background in actual hard-nosed campaigning?
Mm. So I think our major thing at the moment is very much the March for Clean Water.
We
We've
are promoting that, of course.
yeah. So it feels like all that work of kind of um first we had to convince everyone that there was a problem, and I feel like we've done a really good job of that. Like you said, like everyone is fed up with the river quality and knows about it. And I think our major thing now, while the bill is going through with Parliament, is to show the government just how many people are frustrated, and that's part of the motivation behind the March for Clean Water is to show how many people are frustrated, that it does need to be a priority and not like a greenwashing exercise, not just kind of empty sort of platitudes, I suppose. Um, and and to show that it affects like a wide range of different people, like you say, with rowers, with swimming groups, environmental groups, how it affects everyone. And we feel like that's our launching point for then kind of having those more meaningful conversations with Parliament, with pressure groups, with lobbying groups, things like that to bring things together. Um, but it may be worth dropping me an email after this, and we can talk about kind of more specific, like what's next in the campaign steps for kind of around Oxfordshire, kind of more specifically, and maybe
Okay, I'd be
pressuring
happy to do
those
that.
local MPs as well,
Yes.
who
Well,
have
they're
just
all
got
on
in.
board. I think the
Yeah.
challenge is how do we go from a very loose coalition
Mm.
to something that can actually really have a targeted impact? I mean, Annalisa Dodds, Labour MP, Minister, local MP, totally on board, but she's got 96 other priorities. We've
Yeah.
got 5 Lib Dems, all of whom are totally want to be on board. How do we use them? Very different to how we approach Annalisa.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of, and really it is this thing about everyone's on board, but no
Yeah.
one's really kind of down in the engine room stoking up the motor.
Yeah. And kind of working out, right, what is the next
And which
steps?
direction do we sail it? Yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah.
suppose that, I mean, maybe we actually need a workshop, but
Yeah, I think you're right, Chris. I think meeting up, discussing, what's your strategy, what's your mission, what are your aims, getting all together, hosting some sort of event or meeting and taking the Clean Rivers Initiative to a more, the next level, more organized, more pinpointed, sort of just leveling up the group, right?
I'm sure we're not the only place where the kind of coalitions like this are kind of needed. And to some extent, the logical thing would be to have a river action group that was taking the lead. The problem is pretty much all the people involved in stuff. So we've got more environmental groups than we know what to do with in the city for various reasons,
Hmm.
and trying to find space for another one. So yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to talk further on this. I'll drop you a note. I'm
Oh,
sorry, I don't
great.
want to dominate, but I'm sure we're not the only place where people are thinking, what are we actually going to do for the next 6 months after March?
Yeah, I mean that's the point of the rescue kit. We've written it so that groups can help, take it to the next level. And whilst we can't be involved in every place where this is needed, which is many places, as you say, Chris, we are happy to be facilitators and it's an interactive thing. We're not just sticking you out on your own and saying, right, here's what you need, get on with it. We're very much keen to support and equally take support from groups like yourself going forward. So do reach out, yeah.
Okay.
Fab. Caroline, you've got your hand up. Have you got a question?
Thanks very much, Drew. Really interesting presentation. I had a couple of questions. One which I suspect you might not be the person who has the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. With the Save the River Wye group, do you know where they got all the data from on where the chicken farms are? Was it a freedom of information request, do you know? Because it turns out it's quite difficult to find that.
I can take this one, Drew, if you like.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
They did do freedom of information requests to local councils and to, I think it was Natural Resources Wales, and which is the equivalent of Natural England.
Yeah.
It has to go through a planning process. I think CPRE which again would be Campaign for Protection of Rural Wales in this case. Their bread and butter is planning, and these intensive poultry units have to go through the planning process. So they were aware of some of them. It's a combination of all of them. They had people on the ground going out looking for them. You can smell them. You can see them from far off. They had actual chicken counters. And called Angela. So yeah, it was a process of piecing it together through various sources of information. On the rescue kit as well, we've talked to the people who did that in the Wye and written down and signposted to the resources which they used to do so.
Yeah, because it's amazing that there isn't something like that. Just, I naively thought I'd be able to just Google it and find out where they all are across all of the UK, but it's so hidden, isn't it? So I wonder if someone will take that on at some point and do a national version of it, because that would be amazing. And then my other question then was around the groups that you showed on your map. Are they all doing are they quite independent groups, all sort of doing their own thing, or are you kind of standardizing methodology between groups? To what extent are they sort of river action groups?
They're not river action
kind of individual groups doing things.
They're all independent groups who we've worked with and supported and collaborated with at various points, but they're not. We don't want to. We're not taking any credit for them. Some of them existed before River Action did. They're just purpose of that map is to point other people to groups near them that are doing something where they can work with. So they're not under our umbrella, as you say, at all. We're just aware of them, and they've given us permission to signpost to them so people can find.
Okay, so they're all doing slightly different things.
Yeah, so we'd include welcome any group onto that map.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much.
I was just going to add that I think it'd be great to get the ECP on that map as far as, open to anybody within the Even Load Catchment Partnership to participate in any of our actions. We do a lot of the citizen science training opportunities and just trying to get communities to collaborate or going out and presenting to them about the river situation and the decline of the Even Load in particular. But it would be great to get us on that map. I think we're also on the coalition map for supporting the March for Clean Water in November. And we're really hoping to get some of our communities down there. I think we may have applied to your fund to try and get some people down there, because it's really, really difficult in a rural catchment to try and get down to London as far as the cost and the transport that's available. It can really be something that inhibits people. So hopefully we'll be able to go down there and be part of that flood of the river, flooding of the roads in London and making our point. That would be brilliant. And I think I'm really personally, as a community outreach person, looking forward to the launch of your kit, because people are always asking, what can we do? And there's a strong feeling of being disempowered and not being able to do anything, other than maybe take some water samples. So it would be really, really good to actually share that out and empower people, I think, to make that change. And hopefully the march will encourage them to participate. That's my hope.
I hope so too.
Drew, in lieu of any other questions, we do like to ask people what book or movie may have inspired you, either in the distant past or the more recent times, as far as your actions and your motivation towards making change. Can you tell us any book titles that might be out there for people to look to?
Yeah, I was hoping I'd be really highbrow and have some really kind of technical sort of very very focused book or something like that. But I think it's kind of something that impacted me more when I was younger, when I was a teen. And it's a film, Princess Mononoke. It's a Studio Ghibli film. It's animated, and the themes are very much about industrialization and the slow decline of nature, and like pollution literally takes a form of kind of like black sort of creeping gunge throughout it. Lots of the Studio Ghibli films very much kind of focus on that industrialization and that slow decline of nature. So yeah, if anyone's not seen it, I definitely recommend it, and it's one that families can watch. Now I've said that, I'm like, is there blood in it? But yeah, I definitely recommend. Definitely got me interested in kind of, well, I've always been interested in nature, but it definitely spoke to me.
Fab. Well, if no one else has got any more questions, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us, Drew and Henry from River Action. We look forward to seeing you in a few weekends' time at the March for Clean Water on November the 3rd.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And yeah, very much looking forward to meeting you in person down in London.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Fab.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.